Welcome to the Renewed Nurse podcast, focusing on nursing well-being, presented by the Centers for Nursing Excellence.
I'm Melanie Houston, and I'm the Chief Nurse Executive for WVU Medicine.
Hi, and I'm Allie Dempsey. I'm a med-surg nurse working at Ruby Memorial Hospital.
So today we're going to talk a little bit on a recap on our conversation we had with Sarah Hollins. She's from Camden Clark, and she taught us a lot about creating space.
Absolutely. She gave us a very good kind of intro and perspective into what she does daily. She focused her career a lot on behavioral health. She told us a really heartfelt story about her dad and how she got to where she was because of that situation. So that was really nice to hear. And then she also talked about making space for both physical and mental well-being.
Yeah, it was really touching for her to share her story. And then she talked a lot about making space. And you know, I traditionally thought about making space, like just taking a little time out for myself to do something special, but it's a lot more than that.
Right.
It's getting physical space or whatever it means to you. Sometimes that means taking a break. Sometimes that might mean, like I said, walking around Marshall's. And so, you know, it just, whatever it means to you. And the other thing she talked about was Schwartz rounds, which I think was new to you.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a national program that Camden Clark, started there. I think Children's is doing it as well. And it's a deliberate time and purpose and focus on talking about how it feels, looking at the patients, and doing some storytelling. And so I thought it was really cool to share that with everyone.
Yeah, and I like how you use that word deliberate. I mean, it's intentional, it's focused, and it's concise. It's something that we have to bring into every single nursing, aspect of our lives, whether it's on the floor, at home, every day. It's important to kind of create that space. And I like how she definitely mentioned Schwartz rounds and how that impacted her.
That's a good learning for us.
Absolutely, yeah. She also did mention like the chaplain services and just having, whether it's spiritual or not, just those support systems, which kind of brings us into our next guest, speaking about chaplains.
Right, and she talked a lot about psychological safety,
yes,
which was really key for me because we all kind of hear about that, but she talked about how critical that is. And I think our next guest, the chaplain's going to touch on how we bring spirituality and our whole self to the workplace. So,
right, yeah, we're excited to meet Devan and hear from him.
And we are so pleased to have our guest, Devan Voight. And he is a chaplain at WVUH. And we are so excited to have a guest from Ruby Memorial who's going to talk to us about spirituality and the work that he's doing. He primarily works at the Cancer Institute at WVUH, and we're so excited to have him tell us some more thoughts on the concept of well-being. So welcome, Devan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi. So like I said, we're going to kind of get started, and we've talked about mental well-being, physical well-being, what we kind of do to navigate both of those. But before we even get started, I just want your opinion. Like, what is your feelings on well-being? How do you even describe it? How would you say, in your personal opinion, what does it mean to you?
I think that's a great question. And I think when it comes to well-being, we're thinking of how do we take care of ourselves, or how do we practice self-care? Yeah. And for everybody in general, I think it's very important because we have so many responsibilities in life to take care of ourselves, sometimes others, be it kids, parents, pets, things like that. But when you zoom into caregiving professions like nursing, for example, you are not just caring for yourself and those things, but you're caring for so many other people on a day-to-day basis. And for nurses, you're not just caring for the physical aspect of patients, but often you find yourself caring for the emotional aspect of patients too. And it takes something from yourself to give that, to create that space for a patient to feel safe enough. And so I think that when it comes to well-being, for nurses and for other caregivers, it is that much more important to be attentive to that for themselves.
So Allie, isn't it interesting how, like in our episodes, there's so many overlaps because we talk about our patients, and usually we talk about our patients before we talk about ourselves.
I usually start out with how my patients are doing, and then it comes back to me. So it's every single episode.
We forget about the toll it takes on us. And so that's what we really are so interested in. And I think that's really where our podcast is going. So tell me about the passion that brought you to this work, because I think it's so interesting. Always hearing the stories, because we all have a story about how we got here.
Mm-hmm. When I was younger, I always wanted to do some kind of work where I was, supporting other people. I didn't know exactly what that would look like. I always wanted to be connected somehow to a faith-based approach or a spiritual approach. The pulpit never really felt like it connected with me. I never felt a calling or a vocation to that. But as I started to explore chaplaincy more in the military and hospitals, hospice, prisons, all over the place, I started to feel that passion kind of rising again. I went to do an internship to kind of test the waters and see how I liked it. And it connected. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the people. I loved the staff element of it, getting to know the nurses and work alongside of them. And here I am 6.5 years later. So.
And we're so glad to have you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's crazy how fast things, you have this passion for something, you don't really think about it, and then you turn this into like an everyday, I'm making a change kind of mission. So that's super awesome. As far as like coming from a spiritual perspective, I know there can be, some tosses and turns. A lot of patients don't want to be involved with a religion perspective, or, they don't necessarily know what the job title means and what it offers. So do you feel like there are any innovative approaches to kind of offer to both the nurses, the hospital staff, just in general?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right that when a chaplain is mentioned, there's often this immediate association of, oh, it is a Christian chaplain who's going to begin, evangelizing or preaching to me. But to your point, not everybody in the hospital is going to have that same approach, that same belief system or worldview. So whether they are patients or staff, we do our best to meet that spiritual need for those people. I think my understanding of spirituality is that we are all spiritual people. I understand that through different connections, those meaningful connections that help us to make meaning of our life and our experiences. So for a lot of us, that might be a particular faith approach. For some of us, that might be disconnecting and getting out in nature, spending time with animals, spending time surrounded by community or people. I think from what I've seen when WVU is playing a home game, there's a lot of connection there. So I imagine to some extent, right, there's a spiritual connection happening amongst the fans and the team and everybody coming together for that event.
Well, that's cool. I never thought about that. And, I've only been with WVU Medicine about 3 years. And the first time I saw that happening, I was like, that is so cool, right? That we're all tied in together. And I had never thought it tied into that. So it's like a lot of different things, right? And so, when nurses come into the door, I don't really think they think about their spirituality or they kind of leave it at the door. And I think that's one of the things that I'm learning, right? Is how do we bring our whole self? And so how do you think spirituality in the workplace, right, affects somebody's well-being?
No, I think you're correct that we do bring our whole selves into the workplace. Even when we try to maintain some level of work-life balance, we try to check it at the door. It still comes in with us. Whatever our morning was like, whatever our previous night was like, whatever is going on in our minds, we're going to bring all of that with us to work. And so I think it's important to be able to acknowledge that. Some of the ways that myself and our other chaplains try to do that is by creating space to just allow nurses to breathe, to process, and to share with us. Part of the way we do that is by maintaining a constant presence on the unit, trying to build that trust, because I don't think you can share with somebody if you don't really trust them to hold that with you. And one of the ways that I think our departments recently experienced that come to fruition is we had a physical therapist approach us with the month of Ramadan, or the celebration of Ramadan coming up. She mentioned that the hospital hadn't really provided Ramadan meals for patients before, as well as for staff who are breaking fast. We had built a relationship with her where she trusted us with that, handed it over to us, and between her, myself, and some other chaplains, as well as a lot of people from nutritional services, we were able to come together, kind of brainstorm a plan and implement that. That was a year ago. This year, hardly a conversation needed to be had. They were already running with it. And so that was a faith-based way that we could meet the needs of some of our staff here at the hospital.
Well, that's a cool story.
I think that's interesting to hear. I mean, there are so many nurses that we have no idea, what they celebrate, what they need to go through. And lucky if they even get a lunch, let alone before thinking about their fast.
Unfortunately.
So that is interesting. That's awesome that happened. And that's awesome for that nurse. I know you talked about trust building and kind of establishing that relationship with the nurses being present, but what does that process look like to you? You know, whenever you go into the workplace, how do you establish that trust with the nurses rather than, okay, it's just another person to talk to? Like I need to take away from my time. Like, how do you get them to kind of just sit down, acknowledge your presence, and, you know, feed off of that and work from it?
Get them to take a minute, right? Yeah. How do you do that?
We in our department have the understanding that, you know, if we can take care of our nurses, they can take care of their patients. And so our hope is to be physically present with the nurses, right? And sometimes that just looks like while we're up on the unit or the floor, popping by the nursing station while they're charting, while they're, you know, reviewing what the patient needs might be, and just check in on them and say, how are you doing? The plus side is, as you get to know them and they get to know you, you know, there's more honesty there. I think also you get to kind of know cues a little bit better, so you can maybe, as you build that relationship, use some of that relational collateral to inquire more intentionally about, no, how are things going? And then build off of that to be able to say, hey, you were talking about your dog last week. They weren't feeling well. How's your dog doing? You know, that demonstrates a sense of care and connection that I think allows people to, and certainly for myself too, right, to feel safe to share with somebody. And like you said, to pause, to take that minute, because when you're so busy at work, to your point, Allie, you don't have time to eat lunch all the time.
Right.
And so how do you steal time? How do you take that time to just recognize, you know, what you're feeling, maybe where you're carrying the tension, breathe through it, pray through it, recite that mantra you need to move on for the remainder of the day. Because odds are when you go home, there's more stuff yet to be done.
You know, you bring up a great word I never thought about as collateral. You know, trust is important, and I understand trust and being around, but it doesn't happen just one time, right? It's seeing somebody's, you know, presence again. You're going to be here for me. And it really reminds me of a story that happened to me many years ago. And I'm going to share something that's kind of touching to my heart. And, you know, I hope in a way that understands we all bring a lot. This happened a long time ago. At the age of 37, I was widowed. And I had 2 small children at the age of 2 and 6. And it was really hard, as you can imagine. And I was working in a hospital in Pittsburgh. And, you know, every day I would come in and people were great. You know, they were gracious and helpful. But I ran into the chaplain and she was like, how are you doing? And I said, can I share with you something that you might be able to help me with? And she's like, of course. I said, I'm struggling with going to church. And she said, understandably. She goes, but I have a tip. I was like, a tip? Okay. And she said, you know, when you go to church, I said, it's hard to see all these people. They have their kids, they have their husband. I'm standing there alone with my 2 kids. And I feel like I'm seeing all these other families. And here I am. And she said to me, it's simple, but it helped me to get back to my religion and my faith, where she said, sit in the front pew, look and pray forward, and think about you and the children, so you're not looking back and being distracted and sad about what I don't have and thinking about what I do have. And that was because she had built trust and I knew her and she knew me as a person. So it's a kind of it's a personal example, but it helps me to think about, I had collateral with her. Yes. I mean, she had collateral with me, right? And so that's something that I'd like to share with people because it helped me. And now my kids are 27 and 31. And, you know, it's a story that touched me even years later.
I think that just kind of brings you to a great metaphor. I mean, obviously, you know, things do happen in everyone's lives, but you took that decision and you sat in the front row.
Right.
You took a moment for yourself. You were only focused on one thing, and whatever you didn't want to see and whatever you didn't want to acknowledge, it was behind you. Yeah. So I think that's really important to kind of acknowledge even day-to-day life. I mean, if we put ourselves first, very front row, we can kind of handle things and tackle things. So.
And eventually I moved back, right?
We come back a couple rows and then we move back up.
Right, it helped me. So tell me like some innovative things that you do to just, you know, take care of the nurses. You know, it's everybody, but we're focused on nurses. We care about everybody, right, Allie? But like things that you do to get them to pause, think about their spirituality that are kind of simple like that.
Yeah. One of the things that our department's been doing over the last 2 years is implementing something that we call a postcode pause. And so in the event of a terminal adult code, we try to step into that space to acknowledge, the team involved, the nurses who are involved in the patient's care, acknowledge the patient whose life has ended, and provide a moment for 15 or 20 seconds for just everybody involved to pause and use that time however they need to. Because so often after a code blue, the nurses have, 2 to 4 plus other patients they have to attend to. They don't have that opportunity necessarily to stop and to recognize the reality of what just happened, the weight of what just happened, to connect to their faith or their spiritual practice. Again, it could be breathing, it could be a prayer, it could just be a moment of recognition. But to create that space for them to process before stepping away, to just take that minute.
Can you do that at work? Can you find that time?
I can find the time if I acknowledge that I need it. You need to give yourself that permission to do so. And that's hard for nurses to do sometimes because we think that, we're last resort. Everything else is handled. We spend our days every single day taking care of other people and their needs, and our needs are often kind of dissolved. And we can just handle that later when we get home. But in reality, we need to be taking care of ourselves during that 12-hour day, even if it's for a few minutes.
You got to get your peers to think about that.
Yeah.
15 seconds is
that's
not
all
that
you need.
long, right?
No, not
That's
at
all
all.
you need.
It can feel long when you're in the 15 seconds.
Right.
So other things, I'm sure you've got a list of things that you do. So come on, give us some more information.
Melanie always talks about the tea. She loves the tea.
Yes.
Tea
I
for the
love
soul.
tell them about Tea for the Soul.
Yes, I'd love to. Tea for the Soul is something that I've been doing on my oncology unit. So both on the inpatient side, outpatient for day shift and for night shift. Usually during Nurses Week, which is coming up here soon. And then usually around the time of Thanksgiving, I will kind of go into certain lunchrooms, or on one of our floors, we have kind of a room called the Zen room that's meant for people to just kind of step out. I'll set that up with a nice tablecloth. We'll have a diffuser going with some aromatherapy. We'll have some calming music playing. Sometimes we'll have little mandalas to color, things like that to just kind of promote slowing down. And then I'll set out some tea and some snacks, and I'll round the nurses up, let them know what's going on and where. And usually for about 2 hours, we'll have that set up, we'll have it running. And it has just been a wonderful opportunity, I think, for the nurses to step off the unit and just take a minute to decompress, to talk. Usually I'm there. Sometimes it's a wonderful opportunity for me to get to know them more, to talk with them either about work, about home, about some fun event they have coming up. You learn a lot about nurses' passions and hobbies in that too, but it just gives you that space to slow down, to decompress a little bit. And I think that's important because we all need that throughout the workday.
Right. I think consistency is key. You can always go up to someone, ask them how their day is, and then move on. And I don't even know their name at the end of the day. Right. But if you remember, hey, they had a dog that, they just got. Okay, how's the dog doing? Okay, now I've acknowledged your presence. I know that, a little fact about your life that we can kind of follow up on. One thing I wanted to bring up is I heard it the other day at work, and I've never heard it before, but it was called blessing of the hands. And I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. I'm not exactly sure of what you do for it, or, if it's a group of people, kind of what the process is on that.
Yeah, it's something that, again, for Nurses Week, which is coming up soon.
Right, yeah, I love that's why it's coming up.
Yes, we will fill a basin, or rather we'll fill a pitcher with some warm water, and we'll have a basin underneath of it. We'll usually have it on a cart so we can roll it around the unit, take it to the nurses. We'll have, again, a diffuser present to kind of, provide a nice soothing aroma, usually lavender or something adjacent. A nicely decorated cart, and we'll go from nurse to nurse, recognizing who they are, what they're doing. And while their hands are being used to bless so many patients, we want to take that pause to recognize it and bless their hands in return. It is not a faith-based ritual. I would say it was more of a humanistic ritual to just recognize the hard work that nurses are doing daily. And again, provide that moment of pause for them to perhaps reflect on what they do and how much it matters.
You got to get the nurses on your unit to
I know,
pause,
I know.
Allie.
It's a lot of work. We'll get there though. But no, I think that's really important. I mean, nurses use their hands for quite literally everything. Some things fantastic, some things not so great, but it just depends on every single day. So just to have that, even just washing my hands with warm water sometimes feels like, okay, I can finally relax. So doing it and actually having a meaning behind it, that's pretty cool.
And acknowledging that moment, right? That our hands sometimes are healing, sometimes are sympathetic.
Sometimes we're holding hands.
Right.
You know, it's just
walking down the hall like you talked about the other day,
Yes.
right?
My little pap, he just says, come on, babe, let's go. And then we just go walking down the hall. Like it's every single day you're using your hands. At least, I don't care if it's 12 hours, 8-hour shift, you're doing one thing good. And you should acknowledge that even if it's just that one thing, you made a change throughout someone's life. So.
Yeah, and Nurses Week is a time to think about these things and acknowledge, how important the work is for nurses. But you've given us some tips and tricks that don't take a lot of time. It's stopping to acknowledge. I love Tea for the Soul. I did it where I used to work, and I love it here now. It's just like people first say, I don't have time, right?
Yes.
And then if you get them to stop for 5 minutes and have a tea, you could just see people like relax. And so I love that. And so, you shared us a lot about how to manage. Is there any other things you'd like to share with us at the end? Because we are so grateful that you came to talk to us today.
Yeah, I think just going back to the theme of pausing, Darlene Dobkowski, who I believe is currently a nurse researcher, she had a wonderful statement that she had made on, self-care, and that a lot of these wellness workshops we try to engage in are really helpful, really beneficial, but they do often take a lot of time. And nurses are often short on time. If you're pulling a 12-hour shift, if you're picking up a shift, if you have a lengthy commute to come in and then responsibilities at home, making time for a wellness workshop just isn't necessarily feasible, right? It's not in the cards. But what Darlene Dobkowski kind of says in lieu of that is, if you can't make time for those things, then just make time to pause where you are. Make time to notice what it feels like in your body, how you're holding your breath. Are you breathing sharply through your chest? Are you holding tension in your shoulders? To kind of recognize that and allow you just that space to do a self-check-in and decompress, because if we don't know what's going on in ourselves, then we often aren't able to address what that thing is in the first place.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Devan. I appreciate you coming out. Melanie, we enjoy talking to everyone that comes in. We've talked to many people that have worked alongside with the nurses at Ruby, but the next episode, we're actually going to talk with one of the nurses at Ruby. So I think that'll be very exciting to kind of get a little bit of change of pace, but we appreciate you coming out and giving us a different perspective on spirituality versus kind of religion and how we can navigate both of those pathways to ultimately, affect ourselves at the end of the day.
I think our next guest, Mara, worked at Ruby and has worked at
Management,
UHC.
yes.
And what's really cool is, around our system, you can move around. But I want to ask you, can I call you too?
Yes, no, certainly. Anytime you need to get in touch with the chaplain, especially at the Ruby campus, the extension 74185.
Okay, you got that?
I have it on my little badge, buddy.
Yeah.
My manager's real good about that. She's got all of the numbers on there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So, Allie, also thanks for bringing the perspective of the nurse on the unit, because I care deeply about their work, but since I haven't done it for a long time, it helps me. And I know they're busy and they have a lot of patients, but it really helps me to reflect on my time as a nurse. And so, Devan, this has been great. We're so happy you came.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. Well, next week, we will be listening to, like I said, Mara Mullen. She's going to be joining us. And if there's any other inquiries, information, recommendations, please reach out to Melanie at melanie.houston, HEUSTON @WVUmedicine.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast and video presentation were brought to you by the WVU Medicine Center for Nursing Excellence. For comments, questions, or suggestions, please email melanie.houston@wvumedicine.org with the subject heading Podcast Feedback. This program was executive produced by our Chief Nurse Executive, Melanie Houston, and developed and produced by me, Eric Small, with the Center for Nursing Excellence. Multimedia production and recording is by Chad Atkins. Our logo was designed by Carly Kale. We want to raise a special thanks to all of our partners in the marketing department at WVU Medicine for their work on this project, and to the nurses who dedicate so much time, effort, and care for the patients of WVU Medicine. Thank you.